Council called us unstable until they met our ghost ships. The Nexus Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of crystalline architecture, its bioluminescent walls pulsing with the heartbeats of 1,000 different species. At the center, the Tribunal of 12 sat in judgment, their combined authority representing every major civilization in the Andromeda Spiral. Admiral Grace Lynn stood at the defendant's podium, her crisp Terran Defense Force uniform a stark contrast to the flowing robes and exotic carapaces surrounding her. Behind her, the human delegation sat in silence, 27 representatives of humanity's 400 billion souls, reduced to observers in their own trial. Tribunal Prime. Kelthner rose from the central dais, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic rainbows. When he spoke, his voice resonated through neural translators, carrying the weight of absolute authority. The Galactic Stability Council has reached unanimous verdict, he announced, his words rippling across the vast chamber. The human species has been classified as Category 7 unstable. Effective immediately, all Terran vessels are restricted to their home system. Quantum gate access is hereby revoked. Murmurs of approval rippled through the alien galleries. The Vorthak delegation, massive, crab-like beings encased in powered armor, clicked their mandibles in satisfaction. The ethereal Zephyrians floated higher, their gaseous forms shimmering with contentment. Admiral Lynn's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. On what grounds? Kelthner's form shifted, colors deepening to an ominous crimson. Your species has initiated 17 separate conflicts in the past century. You have violated 12 separate peace accords. Your emotional volatility and tendency toward violence make you a threat to galactic stability. Those conflicts were defensive actions. Silence. The word cut through the hall like a blade. The decision is final. Your species will remain in isolation until such time as you demonstrate emotional maturity. The Council estimates this will require no less than 500 standard years. The gavel fell, or rather a harmonic resonance echoed through the chamber that served the same purpose. The human delegation was escorted out in silence, their protests falling on deaf ears. But as they departed, none of the assembled species noticed the brief, satisfied smile that crossed Admiral Lynn's lips. 18 months later, deep in the Kuiper Belt, Station Tartarus hung in the void like a mechanical spider. Its dark hull absorbed light rather than reflecting it, rendering it nearly invisible against the star field. Even its heat signature had been dampened to background levels through revolutionary thermal dispersion technology. Inside the station's command center, Admiral Lynn stood before a holographic display showing the Sol system's defensive grid. Red icons marked the positions of the Galactic Council's monitoring stations, 17 automated sentinel posts that watched Earth's every move. "Status report," she commanded. Commander Marcus Rodriguez, her chief of staff, consulted his datapad. "All 6 Ghost Fleet carriers are operational and fully staffed. Total complement, 144 Phantom-class fighters, 36 Revenant heavy destroyers, and 12 Spectre dreadnoughts. Phase shift drives tested and calibrated." Lynn nodded grimly. The Ghost Fleet had been humanity's most classified project, a black-budget program that had consumed the resources of entire star systems. While the Council debated humanity's fate, Earth's best engineers had been perfecting technology that shouldn't have existed. "What about the crews?" "All volunteers from the Deep Space Corps. Every man and woman aboard understands the risks." Rodriguez paused. "Admiral, are we really going to do this? Once we reveal ourselves, there's no going back." Lynn turned to face the massive viewport, where the distant sun appeared as little more than a bright star. "Marcus, they called us unstable, primitive, unfit for civilized society." Her voice hardened. "Time to show them what unstable really looks like." She activated the station-wide communication system. Throughout Tartarus, in mess halls and maintenance bays, in crew quarters and weapons lockers, her voice echoed with cold authority. "All hands, this is Admiral Lin. For 18 months, we've watched and waited while the Council treats humanity like children in need of supervision. They've cut us off from the galaxy, isolated us, and declared us unfit for civilization." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Today that ends. Project Ghostlight is now active. All crews to battle stations." Throughout the hidden station, alarms began to sound. Not the urgent klaxons of emergency, but the slow, deliberate tones of preparation. In the massive hangar bays, lights flickered on to reveal the impossible. Ships that seemed to exist and not exist simultaneously, their hulls shifting between visibility and transparency like mirages made of metal. Captain Elena Vasquez strapped herself into the pilot seat of her phantom fighter, the Wraith's Edge. Around her, the cockpit displays showed readings that defied conventional physics. Phase variance at 87%, quantum coherence holding steady, temporal displacement drives on standby. "Ghost leader to all flights," she broadcast on the encrypted channel. "Final systems check. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every species the Council has decided isn't worthy of freedom." Monitoring station. Kepler-7 drifted in the asteroid belt, its sensors trained on Earth's orbital traffic. The station was a marvel of Council engineering, a joint project between the Zephyrians and the hegemony's finest technicians. Its quantum sensors could detect a single ship jumping within a dozen light-years. Its communication arrays could track every transmission in the Sol system. Senior Observer. Takala of the Meridian Collective floated before the primary sensor display, her tentacles interfacing directly with the station's neural network. She was a creature of living crystal and bioelectric energy, her consciousness existing partially in both the physical realm and the station's data streams. Anomalous reading. Sector 7 Alpha, reported her assistant, a young Forthak named Greshatar. His mandibles clicked nervously as he interpreted the sensor data. Quantum fluctuations consistent with… I'm not sure what they're consistent with. Takala extended her consciousness deeper into the sensor grid. What she found made her recoil in shock. The readings were impossible. Massive energy signatures that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, objects that registered on gravitational sensors but not optical ones. "Alert the Council immediately," she commanded. "Something is…" The transmission cut off. Throughout the station, lights flickered and died as systems shut down one by one. In the command center, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the walls as the main displays went dark. "What's happening?" Greshatar demanded, his voice cracking with panic. Takala tried to access the communication array, but found only dead circuits. Through the station's viewports, space appeared empty. But her enhanced senses detected something else. Movement. Shadows that shouldn't exist. Then they appeared. Ships materialized around the monitoring station like ghosts becoming solid. Their hulls were sleek and predatory, colored in shades of deep blue and black that seemed to absorb light. Strange energy patterns danced along their surfaces. Not shields, but something else entirely. The lead vessel was massive, easily the size of a Council dreadnought, but built along entirely different principles. Where Council ships were utilitarian, this one was artistic. Deadly curves and aggressive angles that spoke to both function and form. A communication signal penetrated the station's failing systems. The voice that emerged was human, female, and utterly calm. Monitoring Station Kepler-7. This is Admiral Grace Lin of the Terran Ghost Fleet. You have 30 seconds to evacuate your station before we reduce it to its component atoms. Takala's tentacles worked frantically at the communication console. This is Senior Observer Takala. By Council authority, you are in violation of 20 seconds. The crystal being's form shimmered with fear. Around the station, more ghost ships materialized, dozens of them, their phase shift drives cycling them between visibility and nothingness. She had never seen technology like this, never imagined it was possible. 15 seconds. I strongly suggest you use your escape pods. Throughout the station, alarms finally began to sound as automated systems registered the imminent threat. Takala grabbed Greshatar's armored claw and pulled him toward the emergency evacuation bay. 5 seconds. They dove into the escape pod just as the station's hull began to buckle. Through the pod's tiny viewport, Takala watched in horrified fascination as the human ships opened fire. But these weren't normal weapons. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, the ghost ships unleashed something far more terrifying. Reality seemed to fold around their targets. The monitoring station didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. Its matter converted to energy, and then to nothing at all. As their escape pod's emergency beacon activated, Takala found herself trembling. In 200 years of galactic service, she had never encountered anything like this. The humans hadn't just built weapons, they had built something that challenged the very laws of physics. The Nexus Assembly Hall erupted in chaos as the emergency session convened. Representatives from 17 species shouted over each other in a dozen different languages, their translators struggling to keep pace with the overlapping conversations. Order! Order! Tribunal Prime Kelthanor's voice boomed through the chamber, his crystalline form flashing with authoritative light. The cacophony gradually subsided into angry murmurs. In the past 72 hours, he announced, the humans have destroyed 9 monitoring stations, disabled 3 patrol squadrons, and somehow vanished an entire hegemony battle group. How is this possible? Admiral Vex High of the Hegemony Defense Force stood to address the assembly. He was an imposing figure, even among the diverse aliens present, nearly 3 meters tall, with midnight black carapace, and 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His species had evolved from apex predators, and it showed. The few survivors describe ships that appear and disappear at will, he reported, his voice a low growl. Their weapons seem to manipulate space-time itself. Our sensors detect massive gravitational anomalies, but often show empty space where our ships are being destroyed. From the Zephyrian section, Ambassador Silthara's gaseous form condensed into a vaguely humanoid shape. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through crystals. This is impossible. No species in the galaxy possesses such technology. The humans were barely achieving faster than light travel when we quarantined them. Apparently, Kelthanor said grimly. We underestimated them. A new voice cut through the debate, smooth, confident, and utterly human. Every head in the chamber turned toward the communication display, where Admiral Grace Lynn's image had appeared without invitation. Greetings, Council members, she said pleasantly. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. The assembly erupted again, but Lynn continued speaking, her voice somehow cutting through the noise. I wanted to personally thank you for the opportunity you've given us. 18 months of isolation has done wonders for human technological development. Kelthanor's form blazed with angry light. You are in violation of Council law. Your attacks on lawful monitoring stations constitute acts of war. Lynn smiled coldly. What law? You declared us unfit for galactic civilization. You cut us off from all diplomatic channels. As far as I'm concerned, we're not bound by your laws anymore. You cannot stand against the entire galaxy, Admiral Vex High snarled. We will mobilize every fleet, every weapon, every... I'm sure you will, Lynn interrupted. But first, you have to find us, and I'm afraid that's going to be rather difficult. The transmission cut off, leaving the assembly in stunned silence. The Hegemony's Third Fleet was the pride of their military. 47 ships of the line, including the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion. They patrolled the outer edges of the Sol system, their sensors sweeping space for any sign of the mysterious human fleet. Admiral Vexahai stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying tactical displays that showed empty space. For 6 days, they had searched for an enemy that seemed to exist only when it struck. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving reports from the 5th Patrol Group. They've lost contact with the destroyer Sharp Talon." Vexhai's mandibles clicked in frustration. "That's the 3rd ship this week. How can an entire destroyer simply vanish?" His answer came in the form of proximity alarms, suddenly screaming throughout the bridge. On the main display, space itself seemed to tear open as massive shapes materialized around the fleet. Not 1 or 2 ships, but dozens. The Ghost Fleet had found them. Captain Vasquez piloted her Phantom fighter through the chaos of battle, her ship phasing in and out of normal space-time. Around her, the Hegemony fleet fired desperately at targets that refused to stay solid long enough to hit. "Ghost Squadron, this is Ghost Leader," she broadcast. "Execute Pattern Omega-7. Let's show them how we earned our name." Her fighter shimmered and vanished, reappearing inside the destroyer Bloodclaw's defensive perimeter. For just a moment, she was solid enough to fire, her ship's reality disruptors tearing through the alien vessel's hull like tissue paper. Then she phased out again, becoming untouchable as return fire passed harmlessly through her ship. Across the battlefield, 36 Phantom fighters executed the same impossible maneuver, materializing inside enemy formations to deliver devastating attacks before disappearing again. The Hegemony ships found themselves fighting ghosts, enemies that could strike from anywhere and retreat to nowhere. But the real terror came from the Spectre dreadnoughts. The GSF Banshee emerged from phase space directly above the Hegemony flagship, its massive form solid for just long enough to fire its primary weapon. The Quantum Cascade Cannon unleashed a torrent of exotic matter that didn't just destroy, it erased. Where the beam struck the Eternal Dominion's hull, reality simply stopped existing. Admiral Vexahai watched in horror as entire sections of his ship vanished into nothingness. His bridge crew scrambled to compensate for the missing mass, but their efforts were futile. The dreadnought was dying, its structure unable to maintain integrity with gaping wounds in the fabric of space-time itself. "All ships, emergency jump," he commanded. "Retreat to rally point." The Banshee fired again, and Admiral Vexhai ceased to exist. The emergency meeting convened in the Council's most secure chamber, deep within the Nexus's heavily shielded core. Only the Tribunal of 12 were present, their various forms of existence focused on the holographic displays showing the aftermath of the Third Fleet's destruction. 17 ships completely destroyed, reported Tribune Megala of the Rift Hunters, her biomechanical form interfacing directly with the tactical data. 23 more severely damaged. The humans suffered no detectable losses. Tribunal Prime. Kelthana's crystalline structure pulsed with dark energy. How is this possible? Their technology appears to violate fundamental laws of physics. Perhaps, suggested Tribune Ithogara of the Deep Reaches, his tentacled mass writhing with agitation. We should consider negotiation. Clearly we underestimated. No. The word resonated through the chamber with finality. Kelthana's form blazed with authoritative light. We will not negotiate with terrorists. The humans have chosen war, and war they shall have. Tribune Selkaris of the Starshapers leaned forward, her energy being form crackling with concern. Prime, if we cannot counter their technology, how do we propose to fight them? Kelthana's colors shifted to deep crimson. We deploy the Terminus Protocol. The chamber fell silent. Even among the tribunal, the Terminus Protocol was spoken of only in whispers. It was the Council's ultimate weapon, a planet killer of unimaginable power, designed to eliminate entire systems if necessary. Prime, Magala said carefully. The Terminus Protocol is forbidden except in cases of existential threat to galactic civilization. And what would you call this? Kelthanor demanded. The humans have demonstrated technology that makes our greatest weapons obsolete. If we allow them to proliferate this knowledge, the balance of galactic power will shift permanently. The Council's authority will be meaningless. Tribune Ethogra's tentacles writhed faster. You're proposing genocide. I'm proposing survival, Kelthanor replied coldly. The humans have made their choice. Now we must make ours. The vote was closer than expected. 7 in favor, 5 opposed. But it was enough. The Terminus Protocol was authorized. Deep in the asteroid belt, aboard the hidden fortress of Tartarus, Admiral Lin studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. Her spy networks within the Council had delivered disturbing news. They've activated the Terminus Protocol, Commander Rodriguez reported grimly. According to our sources, they're mobilizing a battle group of unprecedented size. Estimates suggest over 300 ships, including at least 12 dreadnoughts. Lin stood before the strategic display, watching the red icons representing Council forces mass at the edge of human space. 12 dreadnoughts. They're not planning to occupy Earth. They're planning to sterilize it. Admiral, asked Dr. Grace Kim, the Ghost Fleet's chief scientist, are we absolutely certain our phase shift technology can stand up to that kind of concentrated firepower? Lin turned to face the assembled officers. That's what we're about to find out. But first, I think it's time the Council learned exactly what they're dealing with. She activated the primary communication array, broadcasting on all Council frequencies. Her image would appear on screens across the galaxy, in military command centers, government buildings, and civilian news networks. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, her voice calm and measured. My name is Admiral Grace Lin of the Terran Ghost Fleet. For 18 months, your leaders have told you that humanity is too unstable, too dangerous to participate in galactic civilization. The camera pulled back to reveal the massive command center of Tartarus, with its banks of displays showing Ghost Fleet deployments throughout the system. They were wrong about one thing, Lin continued. We're not dangerous because we're unstable. We're dangerous because we're tired of being told what we can and cannot do by those who fear what we might become. The display behind her shifted to show technical schematics of Ghost Fleet vessels, their impossible technology laid bare for all to see. The ships you've encountered represent 15 years of human ingenuity, technology developed not through conquest or theft, but through the simple human refusal to accept limitations. We don't just bend the rules of physics, we rewrite them. In command centers across the galaxy, military analysts stared at the schematics in disbelief. The technology shown was decades ahead of anything in the Council's arsenal. Your leaders are mobilizing to destroy Earth, Lin said, her voice hardening. They call it the Terminus Protocol. We call it an act of genocide. But before they proceed, they should understand one crucial fact. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with cold fury. You're not hunting a fleet of 200 ships hiding in one star system. You're facing a civilization that has learned to exist between the spaces of reality itself. We are not confined to ships you can see or targets you can hit. We are everywhere and nowhere. The transmission cut to external cameras showing the space around Earth. To conventional sensors, it appeared empty. Then slowly ships began to materialize, not dozens, but hundreds, then thousands. For 18 months, while you debated our fate, we've been preparing. Not just building ships, but building an entirely new way of warfare. Every human colony, every space station, every mining outpost has been converted into a production facility. We didn't just build a fleet, we became one. The display showed impossible numbers, over 10,000 Ghost Fleet vessels, ranging from fighters to dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Council's inventory. You called us unstable, Lin concluded. You were right. We are unpredictable, emotional, and utterly unwilling to submit to authority we haven't chosen for ourselves. That makes us dangerous, not to galactic civilization, but to those who would oppress it. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. The Council's response was swift and overwhelming. Within 72 hours, the largest battle fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of the Sol system. Over 400 ships hung in the void, like a metallic constellation, their combined firepower capable of reducing planets to debris. At the fleet's heart lurked the Terminus Station, a mobile battle fortress the size of a small moon. Its weapons could crack planetary crusts, its shields could withstand the explosion of a star. It was the Council's ultimate expression of military might, a weapon designed to end wars through pure intimidation. Fleet Admiral Kethva of the United Species. Navy stood in the Terminus Station's command center, a chamber so vast it had its own weather systems. Banks of displays showed every ship in his massive fleet, their positions choreographed with mathematical precision. He was a hegemony admiral, but his fleet represented the combined might of 17 species. Zephyrian scout ships danced alongside Vorthak heavy cruisers. Meridian energy beings powered exotic weapon systems, while Rift Hunter battle computers calculated firing solutions. Never before had so many species united for a single purpose. "Fleet status report," he commanded, his four arms working different control interfaces simultaneously. "All task forces report ready," his aide replied. Phase 1 bombardment platforms are locked onto primary population centers. Phase 2 planet crackers are positioned at optimal orbital positions. Phase 3 stellar igniters are standing by. Kethva nodded grimly. The Terminus protocol was designed to leave nothing to chance. First, they would sterilize the major population centers. Then they would shatter the planet itself. Finally, they would destabilize Sol's fusion processes, turning humanity's own sun into their grave marker. "Sir," the sensor operator reported, "we're detecting minor gravitational anomalies throughout the system. Quantum fluctuations consistent with the human phase shift technology." "How many ships?" "Unknown, sir. The readings are inconsistent. Sometimes we show thousands of contacts, sometimes none at all." Kethva's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The humans' ghost ships were an unknown quantity, but numbers alone couldn't overcome the raw power of the Terminus fleet. Even if every human ship materialized simultaneously, they would be overwhelmed by sheer firepower. "Begin Phase 1, he commanded. Across the fleet, weapon systems that had never been used in actual combat began to power up. Planet-killing energies built to levels that warped space-time around the massive vessels. The air in the command center itself became electric with potential violence. Then space around the Terminus fleet exploded into chaos. They came from everywhere and nowhere, ships materializing out of phase space in patterns that defied tactical prediction. But these weren't the Ghost Fleet vessels the Council had faced before. These were something new, something impossible. Captain Elena Vasquez felt her consciousness expand as her fighter's neural interface activated. Around her, the cockpit dissolved into pure information. She wasn't flying through space anymore. She was dancing through the spaces between reality. "Ghost leader to all flights," she broadcast across quantum-encrypted channels. "Execute pattern Ragnarok. Show them what human ingenuity really looks like." Her Phantom fighter split. Not physically, the hull remained intact, but the ship's quantum signature fractured into 17 distinct patterns. To Council sensors, It appeared as if her single fighter had become a squadron. Across the battlefield, every Ghost Fleet vessel executed the same impossible maneuver. Suddenly, the Council faced not 10,000 ships, but over 170,000. Admiral Kethvar stared at his displays in disbelief as his sensors registered impossible numbers of enemy contacts. This cannot be accurate. No fleet could. The answer came in the form of weapons fire that seemed to emerge from empty space. The Ghost Fleet's quantum cascade cannons were firing from positions that didn't exist, their beams materializing inside Council ships before the targets even registered incoming fire. But the true horror began when the Revenant-class destroyers engaged their temporal warfare systems. The GSF Lazarus appeared alongside a Council heavy cruiser, its hull shimmering with exotic energies. Instead of firing conventional weapons, it released a sphere of temporal distortion that engulfed both ships. To outside observers, nothing seemed to happen. But inside the distortion field, the battle had already been fought and won. When the field collapsed, the Council cruiser was gone. Not destroyed, erased from history. It had never existed, never been built, never fired a shot. Even the memories of its crew were wiped from the timeline, leaving only empty spaces in the Council records. "All ships, emergency maneuvers," Kethvar commanded, but his fleet was already fragmenting. Council vessels found themselves fighting enemies that attacked from yesterday and tomorrow simultaneously, weapons that struck before they were fired, shields that protected against damage that hadn't happened yet. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just bending the laws of physics, they were rewriting causality itself. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but lasted only minutes in real time. The Terminus Fleet, the most powerful military force ever assembled, was being torn apart by enemies that shouldn't exist. Admiral Kethvar watched his displays with growing horror as ship after ship simply vanished from reality. Not destroyed, deleted. The Ghost Fleet's weapons didn't kill crews, they retroactively prevented them from ever being born. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice cracking with panic. "We've lost over 60% of the fleet. Remaining ships are reporting massive casualties and system failures. Whatever the humans are doing, our shields can't stop it." Kethvar's 4 hands moved across his controls, trying to coordinate a response to an enemy that violated every principle of warfare. "Focus all fire on the largest signatures. If we can destroy their command ships..." A new voice cut through the bridge communications, calm, professional, and utterly human. "Admiral Kethvar," Admiral Lin's voice said pleasantly, "this is your final warning. Withdraw your fleet immediately, or I will be forced to demonstrate why the Council was right to fear us." Kethvar snarled, his species' predatory instincts overriding tactical sense. "We do not negotiate with terrorists." "Very well," Lin replied. "You wanted to see unstable. Ghost Fleet, execute Protocol Nightmare." What happened next would be remembered as the darkest moment in galactic military history. The remaining Ghost Fleet vessels, all of them, simultaneously, activated their quantum processors and began calculating probability matrices, not for their weapons or defenses, but for reality itself. Space around the terminus station began to shift. The stars moved, constellations rearranging themselves into new patterns. The laws of physics became suggestions, then guidelines, then faint memories. Inside the station, gravity reversed. Time flowed backward. Cause and effect exchanged places. Crew members found themselves aging rapidly, then returning to childhood, then becoming possibilities that might have existed. Admiral Kethvar watched his hands fade from existence as the quantum processors decided he had never been born. Around him, his bridge crew were becoming mathematical equations, their consciousness reduced to probability algorithms. "Stop," he whispered, his voice barely audible as his vocal cords became theoretical constructs. "Please, stop." The distortion field collapsed, and reality reasserted itself. Admiral Kethver found himself whole again, but fundamentally changed. He could remember not existing, could recall the sensation of being nothing more than a statistical possibility. Around him, his surviving crew members showed the same traumatized expressions. They had touched the void between realities and barely returned. "Fleet Admiral," Admiral Lin's voice said gently. "Do you understand now? We didn't become dangerous because we're violent. We became dangerous because we refuse to accept that anything is impossible." Kethver looked at his tactical displays. Of his 400 ships, less than 50 remained. The terminus station itself was intact, but crippled, its weapons systems fused into uselessness by temporal feedback. "What are you?" he whispered. "We're human," Lin replied, "and we're tired of asking permission to exist." The Nexus Assembly Hall had never been so quiet. The surviving Council representatives sat in stunned silence as Admiral Lin's hologram addressed them from the podium where she had once stood trial. 18 months ago," she began, "you declared humanity unfit for galactic civilization. You were wrong. We're not unfit. We're evolutionary." Tribunal Prime. Kelthanor's crystalline form had lost much of its luster, dimmed by the reality of what he had witnessed. "Your technology, it violates the fundamental structure of reality." "No," Lin corrected. "It recognizes that reality is more flexible than you believed. While you spent millennia perfecting weapons that destroy matter and energy, we learned to manipulate the equations that define existence itself." Ambassador Silthara of the Zephyrians condensed into her most solid form. "You could have shared this knowledge, advanced the entire galaxy. Could we?" Lin interrupted. "Your first response to human instability was quarantine. Your second was genocide. What makes you think you would have handled revolutionary technology any differently?" The chamber remained silent. Around the hall, the surviving representatives of 17 species contemplated a new reality, one where humanity was no longer the junior partner in galactic civilization. "What do you want?" Kelthanor asked finally. Lin smiled. "What we've always wanted. Recognition as equals. The right to explore, to trade, to build relationships with other species based on mutual respect rather than conditional tolerance. And if we refuse," Lin's expression hardened, "then you'll discover that the Ghost Fleet was just our opening statement. Humanity has learned to exist in the spaces between reality, Prime. We can be anywhere, anytime, in any form we choose. You can't quarantine a species that isn't bound by the same physical laws you are." "Tribune Megala of the Rift." Hunters leaned forward. "You're threatening the entire galaxy." "No," Lin replied. "I'm explaining new rules. Humanity will not be contained, controlled, or eliminated. We will participate in galactic civilization as equals, or we will forge our own path among the stars. The choice is yours." The vote was swift and unanimous. Resolution 890 was repealed. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges thereof. But as the session ended and the representatives dispersed, many carried with them a disturbing thought. They had not welcomed humanity into their civilization. Humanity had claimed it. 6 months later, Admiral Grace Lin stood in her new office aboard Nexus Station, gazing out at a fleet of ships unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Human vessels worked alongside Zephyrian energy constructs and hegemony dreadnoughts, their crews learning from each other in ways that would have been impossible under the old order. Commander Rodriguez entered the office carrying a datapad. "Admiral, we've received 17 requests for technological exchange from different species. The Meridians want to understand our quantum processes. The Rift Hunters are interested in our temporal warfare systems. Lin nodded thoughtfully. And our response? Limited cooperation. We're sharing theoretical frameworks but keeping the practical applications classified. Trust, but verify. Good. We learned our lesson about revealing our full capabilities too quickly. She turned from the viewport. What about the Ghost Fleet? Still operational and expanding. We now have manufacturing facilities in 12 different star systems, all phase-shifted out of normal space-time. If anyone decides they don't like the new arrangement, they'll discover that humanity's true strength was never our weapons, Lin finished. It was our refusal to accept limitations. As if summoned by her words, Captain Elena Vasquez materialized in the office. Literally, her form shimmered from translucent to solid as her personal phase shift generator cycled down. Admiral, she reported with a grin. The Vorthak Trade Consortium just signed an exclusive shipping contract with Terran Logistics. Apparently, they're impressed with our ability to deliver cargo that technically doesn't exist until it arrives. Lin laughed. The galaxy is learning to appreciate human ingenuity. Some parts of it, Vasquez agreed. Others are still plotting ways to put us back in our cage. Intelligence reports suggest at least 3 species are developing countermeasures to our phase shift technology. Let them try, Lin said confidently. They're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare, weapons and shields, attack and defense. They don't understand that we've moved beyond that paradigm entirely. She activated her desk's holographic display, showing a map of the galaxy with thousands of pulsing lights, each one representing a human settlement, research station, or Ghost Fleet deployment. We're not just another species competing for resources and territory, she continued. We're something new, something that exists in the spaces between their established categories. They called us unstable because they couldn't predict us. They were right, and that's exactly what makes us free. Commander Rodriguez studied the display with professional appreciation. The Ghost Protocol is working. Humanity is spreading throughout the galaxy faster than anyone expected. By the time our former overseers realize the full extent of our expansion, we'll be too integrated to remove. That was always the plan, Lin agreed. Not conquest, evolution. We're not trying to replace their civilization. We're trying to transform it into something worthy of the species that built it. The 3 officers stood in comfortable silence, watching through the viewport as the impossible became routine. Human ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Alien vessels retrofitted with human technology that allowed them to travel through folded space. Trading convoys that arrived at their destinations before they departed their origins. The galaxy had called humanity unstable. In response, humanity had destabilized everything, and in doing so, created possibilities that had never existed before. Admiral, Vasquez said quietly, do you think we did the right thing? Forcing change this way? Lin considered the question carefully. Elena, 18 months ago, the galaxy decided humanity was unfit for civilization. Today, we're teaching them that civilization itself can evolve. She gestured toward the viewport, where a joint human-alien research vessel was testing a new form of faster-than-light travel that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Look at them. Zephyrian scientists working alongside human engineers, Meridian philosophers debating ethics with our AI constructs. We didn't conquer them. We inspired them to reach beyond their limitations. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission. The holographic form of Tribunal Prime Kelthenor appeared in the office, his crystalline structure now pulsing with warm, curious light rather than cold authority. Admiral Lin, he began, his voice carrying a respect that would have been impossible months ago. The Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's proposal for the Transcendence Project. Lin raised an eyebrow. And? Unanimous approval. 17 species have volunteered their best minds to work alongside human researchers in developing phase shift technology for civilian applications. We want to learn how to exist between the spaces of reality. After the transmission ended, the three humans stood in contemplative silence. Through the viewport, they could see the future taking shape. Ships that sailed between dimensions, space stations that existed in multiple realities simultaneously, colonies that could phase out of existence to avoid natural disasters and phase back when danger passed. The galaxy called us ghosts, Vasquez mused. Turns out, being a ghost means never really dying, and never being truly contained. Lin smiled, watching as a human child and a young Vorthak played together in the station's observation deck, their laughter echoing across species barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. "We were never the unstable ones," she said softly. "We were just the first ones brave enough to admit that reality itself could be improved." In the depths of space, the Ghost Fleet continued its eternal patrol, protectors of a new kind of peace, guardians of possibilities that hadn't existed before humanity decided to rewrite the rules of existence itself. The Council had called them unstable. They had been magnificently, transformatively right. The end, author's note. Sometimes the greatest rebellions aren't fought with weapons, but with the simple refusal to accept that impossible means anything at all.